Welcome to Tales in the Dark, where true stories slip into the eerie and unexplainable. In Story 5, we meet a bus driver who finds comfort in his nightly routine until he starts encountering an unusual passenger. A familiar face, a silent presence, and a sense of dread begin to haunt his route, making him question the line between memory and the supernatural. As the mystery unfolds, the shadows of Sacramento reveal secrets that refuse to rest. Prepare yourself for the girl at the bus stop, and if you're drawn to the unsettling unknown, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Now, take your seat. The ride is about to begin. Story 5. The girl at the bus stop. The memory still haunts me. Years ago, I started what I thought would be a simple job as a bus driver in Sacramento, California. My shift began in the evening and wrapped up around 11 p.m. The route was busy with hurried commuters at first, but as night fell, it gradually settled into a familiar calm. Over time, I came to recognize certain passengers, the ones who boarded every night at the same stops heading to work or on their way home. Some I even knew by name, and they'd nod or offer a quick greeting as they boarded, as much a part of the routine as the bus itself. My job as a city bus driver in Sacramento had a comforting predictability to it, a routine I'd come to enjoy. There was a steady rhythm to each shift, the busier rush hour winding down into quieter, near-empty rides by late evening. There were a few unruly passengers here and there, but nothing I couldn't handle. It wasn't mentally taxing, nor did it drain me physically. Most nights passed smoothly, just me, the bus, and the gentle hum of the city as it settled down for the night. Over time, I picked up an extra route on weekend evenings to supplement my income. This route had a stop near a cemetery, and as the night dragged on, the rides got lonelier, a bit eerie, with fewer passengers boarding after dark. At first, driving alone through those dim, empty streets felt unsettling, like something was always lurking just outside the reach of the headlights. But eventually, I got used to the quiet, finding an odd sort of peace in it. Honestly, I started looking forward to those shifts. They gave me time to catch up on my favorite podcast, Darkness Radio, and chat with my girlfriend through my earpiece. There was a freedom in the solitude, a chance to unwind in a way that the usual weeknight shift didn't allow. It was just me, the bus, and the open road in the dark. Over time, I started picking up a regular passenger toward the end of my shift near a gas station. She'd get on quietly, usually exhausted but always polite, and we gradually struck up a friendly rapport. Through our short conversations during her rides, I learned she was a college student working late shifts at the gas station, saving every penny to buy a car, so her commute between work and school could be easier. After a while, she stopped riding the bus, and I figured she'd finally managed to get that car. I was genuinely happy for her, but I'll admit, I missed her company. Nights were long and lonely without anyone to talk to, and most passengers who boarded that late usually headed straight to the back, keeping to themselves. She was one of the few who'd sit nearby and chat, breaking up the quiet in a way I'd come to enjoy. One night, toward the end of my shift, a group of girls boarded the bus, laughing and leaning on each other, and I recognized her instantly. It was the girl from the gas station, my regular. She looked surprised to see me, and as she walked over, I learned that she had, in fact, bought that car she'd been saving for, which was why she hadn't been riding the bus anymore. She explained that she and her friends had been at a house party, and she'd had a bit too much to drink to feel comfortable driving. So, instead, they decided to take the bus back to her place to crash until morning. She'd be back to pick up her car once she'd sobered up. As she chatted away, filling me in on life and school, it felt like old times again, her laughter and easy conversation breaking up the usual late-night quiet. The following weekend, toward the end of my shift, I spotted her standing at her usual bus stop, the one where I used to pick her up. She looked a bit different than I remembered, but I recognized her right away. I pulled over, and she boarded quietly, her face pale, her expression unreadable. Normally, she'd flash a quick smile or say something as she found her seat, but tonight, she didn't say a word. She was wearing something different than her usual gas station uniform, and it caught me off guard. I figured she was just having a rough night. Maybe she'd had a long shift or some bad news, so I left her alone. We rode in silence, and I kept an eye on her in the rearview mirror, wondering if I should say something, but the words never came. After she stepped off, I watched as she walked away, heading in the direction of the cemetery. She moved slowly, her figure getting smaller with each step. I lingered for a moment, half expecting her to turn around or give some sign, but she just kept walking, alone in the dark. Shaking off a strange feeling, I closed the door and continued with my usual route, trying to ignore the chill that seemed to linger in the empty bus. The next weekend, I started my shift again, and just like clockwork, she boarded around the same time as the previous week. She was wearing the same outfit and kept to herself during the short ride. I thought about saying something, maybe asking if everything was all right, but something felt off, and I couldn't shake the strange, uneasy feeling her presence gave me. I half expected her to get off at her usual stop, but when the bus neared the cemetery, she stood up and walked to the door again. I watched as she stepped off, and this time, I noticed something I hadn't before. She was barefoot. I sat there, staring as she moved silently away from the glow of the bus lights, her steps leading her once again in the direction of the cemetery. One weekday evening during my regular shift, a familiar passenger boarded the bus. I recognized her as one of the friends from that night I'd picked up the group of girls. Curiosity and that lingering unease got the better of me, so I asked her about the girl I'd been seeing on my weekend route, the one I used to pick up at the gas station. I mentioned how she seemed a bit off the last couple of times she'd been on my bus. The friend's expression turned somber, and she explained that her friend had been in a terrible car accident the night of the party. She told me that after they'd all left together, the group realized her friend had forgotten her keys, both her house key and car key, back at their friend's house. They were all stranded outside her place for a while, trying to figure out what to do, until she finally decided to take a taxi to go back and get them. They assumed she'd return by taxi, but instead, she chose to drive herself home. On the way back, she ran a red light and was struck by a truck. She died on the way to the hospital. As her words sank in, a chill ran through me. I'd been picking her up every weekend since. Starting my weekend shift again, I couldn't shake a gnawing unease, the dread building as I neared the gas station stop. I hoped she wouldn't be there, feeling a fear I couldn't fully explain. When I pulled up to the stop and saw it empty, a wave of relief washed over me. I wasn't sure how I would have handled it if she'd been there, waiting. But as I drove past, I heard the unmistakable sound of light footsteps approaching the spot where she used to sit. My pulse quickened as I glanced in the mirror. No one was there. A chill swept over me, goosebumps prickling across my arms, and the hair at the back of my neck stood on end. I wanted to scream, to jump out of the bus and run, but I forced myself to stay calm, gripping the wheel with white-knuckled hands. Thankfully, a few passengers boarded as I continued the route, easing my anxiety a bit, but the tension crept back as we got closer to the cemetery stop. When I glanced at the rearview mirror again, I froze. Reflected in the window was the faint outline of a woman's face sitting where no one was. My body seized up, every muscle tight with fear, as chills washed over me. I wanted to stop the bus, to get out and run, but I couldn't bring myself to risk looking like I'd lost my mind in front of the passengers. As we neared the cemetery stop, I heard faint footsteps approaching from behind, slow and steady, stopping right beside me. A cold as we passed the cemetery stop, I couldn't resist looking out the bus window, and that's when I saw her. She was walking along the sidewalk, heading in the direction of the cemetery, her steps slow and deliberate. Her figure moved steadily away from the bus, just as she had that other night, drifting toward the shadows without a single glance back. The sight chilled me to my core, a terror settling in my bones that I couldn't shake. That was it. I knew I couldn't do this anymore. That night was my last on the weekend route. I never drove that path again, and to this day I don't know what to make of what I saw. Part of me believes her spirit, lost and unaware, repeats the same routine she once did, never realizing she's no longer among the living. As we close the chapter on this chilling tale, we're reminded that some souls, lost between worlds, may be bound to repeat their final moments. For the bus driver, this encounter blurred the line between reality and the supernatural, leaving him haunted by the presence of a passenger unable to complete her journey. Perhaps when life ends abruptly, a part of the spirit lingers, drawn to the familiar, unaware of its own passing. Such encounters remind us how little we truly know about the shadows that walk among us. If you've been captivated by these spine-chilling stories and yearn for more journeys into the unknown, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Because here, in Tales in the Dark, the shadows are never far, and the next story is always waiting.